Welcome to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. I'm your host, Johnny Mango. This is the place where we inquire about lifestyle, culture, and careers. Weekly, we meet with new guests that make a contribution of their insightful stories about their careers and how those careers impact their lifestyle and culture. Hello, everybody. This is Johnny, and welcome to Minutes with Mango. Today, we are welcoming somebody who I think is going to be helpful to a couple of different groups, young groups and older groups. It's very rare that we have somebody with that type of background on, so it should be an interesting conversation. I'd like to introduce you to Christine Fruehwirth, who's a life coach, but she works with young and she works with older folks in two different ways. And she's finishing a second book. Her first book was Surviving Life Storms and Thriving in the Aftermath. And this new book is going to be called The 4 Stages of Living. So, Christine, welcome to Minutes with Mango.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, Christine, the way we always like to start is having you give a little background. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. I'm from the DMV area. I have had a business for the last 22 years called Flex Careers Consulting. But before that, I was in banking, investment banking and consumer banking and risk management. Undergraduate degree from Villanova University, and then I had an MBA from the Darden School of Business at the University of Virginia. But for the last 22 years, as I mentioned, I've been doing career consulting and life coaching. And I also simultaneously taught at Georgetown and GW universities for 10 years or so. And so I have a compassion about two different groups, as you mentioned, women that are reentering the workforce after taking care of children, or working moms who are trying to find flexible work arrangements so that they can parent their children. And I also work with college students and recent graduates who are trying to launch their lives and find that great first job.
All right. So let's talk about the 4 stages of living for a few minutes. Can you tell us about that framework and what you described in the first book?
Yeah, so the 4 Stages of Living, which is coming out in April, is the second edition of that first book that you mentioned. And the framework is the same in both books and the material in the second edition. But the framework is the 4 Stages of Living, which was modeled after the 5 stages of grief. The 4 stages are surviving, stabilizing, emerging, and thriving. And so in the book, I go into detail as to what those 4 stages are. At the beginning of the book, I talk about why healing is very important before you get started on that journey. And then I apply it to 5 stages of life, which are careers, marriage and relationships, breakups and divorce, parenting, and the empty nest phase. And I can relate to all 5 of those. And I talk about my experience with those 5 areas, but I also highlight throughout the book people have inspiring stories and how they got through the 4 stages. So I talk about not just my story and my son's story, who is the inspiration behind the book, but I highlight about 10 other people who are very inspiring and help me sort of validate the framework.
Okay. So why do you feel you need to write a second book? What would be the distinction for somebody if they were standing in that bookstore, which most people don't stand in bookstores anymore, but if they were on Amazon or wherever your book is sold, they see the 2 titles. What would be the distinction?
I was proud of writing the first book, but I would say I'm really proud of this second edition because I expanded some of the chapters. I have more call to action and exercises for the reader, so how to apply it to their own lives. And I add a chapter in the book called The Benefits of Being Content versus the Risk of Stagnation. And that was based on feedback that I got from the first book, whether it was a book club meeting or podcast interviews that I was on, where the question came up with, well, what happens if you are just content? And I I found that to be a very interesting concept. So I addressed that in the second edition. I discuss the difference, also the different environments that we are living in between the two books. The first one came out in June 24, and this book is obviously coming out in April. So we're living in a different world, honestly. So I think that I felt like I needed to address that as well. And I updated some of the research and the stories as well as my own healing journey in it. So I feel like this second edition was the book that I was meant to write.
I got a question for you. So, what's the distinction between the two time periods that you feel has changed?
Well, I addressed this in the author's note that just think people are feeling a lot more anxiety. We were coming out of COVID writing the first book. And so that was in 22, 23 was when I was writing that book. So we were dealing with that. But I think that there's just a different political environment this for this book. And I think also there's a lot of people that are struggling to make ends meet. There's people that I know personally that have lost their jobs, friends and also clients because I'm in the DMV area that have lost their jobs because they work for the federal government. So I think that there's a lot of uncertainty, a little, just again, when we were coming out of COVID, there was some hope there. But I think I wanted to address the fact that some people feel like they're in survival mode. So that I also wanted to try to inspire people that regardless of the environment we're dealing with, is that I still feel that people can find their life purpose and can be in a thriving state.
Yeah, I would say that the world seems a little more divisive right now than in the past, but I'm so old I can remember when it was divisive 40 years ago. So,
Right.
but we're definitely in the divisive cycle right now, I would think. Let's talk about the type of clients that you work with, and then I'm really interested in one type of client. But let's tell us about because you got some diverse. To me, it looks like you have some diversity with the types of clients you work with.
Yeah. So I mean, I started my business primarily focused on middle-aged women who were either trying to re-enter or women that were just struggling to balance their jobs with raising children. I focus on them still because it is a challenge when you have a gap on the resume, or in some cases, if you're a working parent, you you are trying to you might off ramp a little bit, go to a part time arrangement, and how does that affect your overall career? Women still deal with inequity when they become parents. And so I deal with that a lot and how to not only just deal with the gap on their resume, but also the gap in salary. And how do they advocate for themselves and how do they negotiate when they reenter to make sure that they're valued. And also, just I focus a lot on their confidence. Women that take a break, and I have three children, and my older two, when we lived in Chicago, I took a break, and then I started this company with when I we had our third child, and so I understand the challenges of reentering or starting a business and all of that. So I definitely think I focus on the confidence and how you have to look at your identity in more of a professional lens, and then how to network. And that's pretty critical when you are reentering.
Yeah, I would think networking is very important. But at the same time, if you've taken yourself out of the marketplace to raise, let's say, a couple kids, that could be a that could be a 10, 15, 20-year span of being out of the marketplace.
Hmm.
How how does one re-network? I would guess that if there is such a term, but I would think
Hmm.
there's a need for re-networking.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we focus on is how to take your social networks. Maybe you go to a synagogue or a church, or
Hmm.
you are involved in your school PTAs. I try to encourage my clients to take their volunteer work and see if there's could be an actual paid opportunity. So some of my clients have done that. I help them. First of all, you have to know how to network on LinkedIn. Some of them don't even know how to do that. So I teach them how to do that. And it really is about preparing for what I call informational interviews and setting up meetings with people developing a strong elevator pitch so that people understand what did you, even if you don't want to go back into the industry or field that you were in, how do you, maybe if you do want to go into something else, like how do you bridge, how do you talk about your story as to why? So a lot of women don't go back into their previous industries. And so we also start, even before we get started on the execution of a job search and the networking piece, we have to discuss, and I put them through like self-assessment exercises so that they really do understand what their strengths, what their interests, and what their values are. And
Yeah.
so pieces, I would say universally, the one of the values is flexibility. So that's what we end up working on. And I've had a lot of success with my clients. They end up getting not just going back to work, but going back to work that in an area that really is they find meaningful. So maybe that's in nonprofit work. I've had some clients do that. I would say, looking at your current network, but also going back to former bosses and seeing if just reacquainting yourself with your professional identity, I think is a big part of it.
I would think there's a number of stay-at-home, what I call stay-at-home parents, and I think it affects both sexes today with stay-at-home. One of the things that I'm curious about is what do you think the percentage, if you know, with people you work with, what do you think's the percentage of those who you work with who said, you know what, I want to get back into the workplace, but I really don't want to be doing what I did before I had a family or took myself out of the workplace years ago? Would you say it's a high percentage of people that want to do something different, or
Yes, I would say I would say at least 2/3, if not three-quarters.
really?
Yeah.
So they've come through whatever life experience, and we'll say raising children or whatever it may be,
Hmm.
um, and they kind of say, "Hey, based on my experience and where I'm at now in my life, I was doing that. Now I want to do this or whatever this is." And I would imagine you help them figure out what this is versus what that was.
Yeah, and I think what I do with most of my clients is if they do want to go back into what they do, I just help the job search, right?
Yeah,
And their resume kind of speaks for itself. I do help them close the gap with whatever, like volunteer work that they've done. Help them professionalize volunteer work. But for the majority of my clients, they don't want to go back into what they used to do because let's say it was consulting work or banking or, it was the demands with long hours or travel doesn't work for them. So now they're looking at it from a perspective of like, how do I do meaningful work, but it works within my a good schedule where I can still be an active and present parent. Yeah, I would say definitely the majority of my clients are going through that self-assessment piece where they are trying to decide now what do I, based again on what my transferable skills are. Also, they learn a lot of skills with parenting, conflict resolution, time management. They can apply those skills, those new skill sets from being a mom to actually the workplace. Flexibility, the one benefit of COVID, the only benefit of COVID is that flexible work environments or work situations has become the norm. And I think people are just demanding those stay in place.
yeah, I think you're right about that. I see some companies now trying to push people back into the office, but I don't think it's going to happen. I can see the split: so many days in the office and so many days remote. But I think the days of being it's so easy to communicate online anymore, just as we are right now.
Right.
For us to do this interview 20 years ago you would have had to come to my physical studio to do the
Yep.
interview.
Yeah.
So I can, the environment, there's so much has changed. And I think you're right. COVID really forced everybody to work, for any better word, work from home. And it forced everybody to kind of set up a home base to work from.
Yeah, it
Anyway,
really to have children still in the home, but the funny thing about it is I don't really recommend that for young people. I think young people need to be in the office because I think it's good to get, have mentorship and
sure.
physical presence. So I think that people that are single or young or whatever, I think that's not as great of a situation for them. where especially if they're working 5 days a week at home from home. I don't.
Yeah, that's a lot of isolation.
Yes.
And whereas, like you're saying, the moms working from home aren't as isolated because they really have something else going on to keep them busy. And well, let's talk about the other type of client that you work with, which is the opposite end of the scale. From what I understand, you work with a lot of young people, right?
Yes, I work with young people who, because I had that 10-year work experience in higher education, I taught a course there as well as worked one-on-one with college students at both those universities. I now work with that kind of client group. So I interestingly enough, work more with men than women. Women seem to have, I don't know, I don't want to say their act together, but they just seem like it's more, I'm tweaking their job search, but men seem to feel they're struggling a little bit. They seem to be behind women in terms of, finding their purpose and things like that. I also have two sons. I have a daughter, but also two sons, so I can relate to how men are a little bit behind women, and also, again, try to help them find what their purpose is and execute a job search. So I actually work with young men. I do work with some women, but mostly men who are either juniors or seniors in college, or they're 25 to 26, 27 years old. Some cases they're still living at home. So two of my clients right now are living at home, and their parents have come to me to help them figure out a plan and get out on their own. I also work with I'm working with these like young, mid-20s males who are just, not sure what to do, and, they can't seem to find a good job for themselves.
Why do you think that is? I I know of my own family members that have been in that place. So, from your perspective, because you work with these, we'll call them guys, a lot, what do you think it is that has caused these mid-20 people, 20-year-olds, to kind of stall out? I'd call it stalling out. It's like
Hmm.
the continuum is, well, okay, I go through school, I get my schooling, I get my education, and then I put myself into the workplace and start doing things. And yeah, I may do a number of different jobs, but I'll be doing something. And uh, I got my MBA. What typically I got my MBA. I went to work for investment banker, and I'm a grunt doing accounting for a couple years until ultimately I become the investment banker, or whatever the career path is. There's
Hmm.
what I'm talking about is entry level versus further up the line. But what we're talking about are, yeah, I got my education. Now I'm going to go live in my parents' basement as a
Yeah.
as a metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's going on? Why do you think that's happening based on what you've experienced?
A couple different things. I think one thing I'm finding is that young men tend to have more distraction, whether it's gambling, online gambling, or they have uh, video gaming, or they're having, I think they're having more issues with, being on their phones a lot and being online in their lives versus out in the world. Uh, that more with men than women, which I think is very destructive. There's a lot of conversation right now about young people and their addictions to social media and things like that. I do think that that's impacting them. I also think that just the role of being a man today is changing. And I think that in the past, I think men have been the providers. That role has been pretty ingrained in our society. And I think now that women are, there's more women in college than men. So it's now 60-40 women. That's flipped from the past. And more women are in medical school, more women are in law school. The one higher education or postgraduate education that it's still mostly males is business schools. But I think that men are just sort of struggling with what their purpose is in society. I also think it's just harder for this generation to buy a home. That's getting out of reach. So I think that many like adult children are going home to save some money. I know this from a lot of my friends. But I think that sometimes you can just kind of get, in that, stuck there because it's comfortable. But, I think a lot of this generation is struggling to even get into relationships. I mean, they're not going on dates that much anymore. That's a big thing that's going on. So I just think men are suffering from that more than women.
Uh-huh. And what about AI? How's AI impacting the workforce and job seekers? You see anything with that?
Yeah, I'm following that really closely and it's changing very rapidly. But, AI is definitely having an impact on job seekers. So, especially my launcher client group, which are, entry level positions, the unemployment rate for 16 to 24-year-olds is currently 9%, which is double the national average. And the postings on Handshake, which is the primary platform for college and universities for the job board, that's job postings are down 15%, are up 30%. And so this is definitely impacting this generation, more so than others. And, the fields that are most impacted are like technology, software development, um, content creation and media, customer service, and data analysis. So these are like the fields that a lot of these college graduates want to go into. So I'm helping my clients avoid those fields, because they're just much more competitive, and the future's a little uncertain. So I think that this generation is going to really struggle. There's not a lot going on to help them in terms of policy or anything like that. So,
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, the industries you named off were the hot industries to go into less than
mhm.
20 years ago. I'm thinking it from a perspective of a parent. You know, little Johnny, you really need to think about getting into the computer game somehow. Maybe being a software developer or what, you know, pushing. We all tend to push our kids in a little bit of direction. What I'm hearing from you is we may have pushed them right over a cliff because of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel for particularly the college graduates that have a degree in computer science
Right.
are taught how to code. I mean, that job's gone. Like, it's not. What does that mean for them? I haven't had a client recently in that area, but my daughter's boyfriend is he's in that field, and I think that it's really challenging. You're going to have to pivot, and that might mean grad school in a different direction. To be in that kind of space, you have to be on the creative side of AI, sort of having the strategy around it versus doing the actual coding. You're not going to, those types of jobs have just gotten completely wiped out. So it is about pivoting and taking maybe the skill set or a minor. Maybe you've studied a minor and maybe going in that direction.
Right.
Uh, but there's other fields I know. You know, even I don't deal too much with this, but I do have friends who have children going into law school, right? Which is also a kind of a common career path post college. And, that field is really being restructured by AI. So I do think that it's hard to predict all of the impact that's going to happen. I mean, it's happening so quickly, but I definitely am spending time talking to clients. I'm also going to start putting out some content around this as to, what fields are, for example, healthcare and any type of field that has human touch associated with it, or even what I've been reading recently is some of the trade schools are really are really coming back,
Yeah.
because, jobs like plumbing or HVAC or other types of jobs or even entrepreneurship or something like that, where it's like hands-on work, is that those types of jobs are not going to be as impacted by AI.
So the jobs that have what I would call direct human
Yes. Yeah.
experience or what looks like they're going to survive the AI thing.
Right.
I just had a plumber at my home the other day, and I can't imagine AI replacing him.
No, and they make a good living. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they sure do. Okay, well, so when's your book coming out? When's the Four Stages of Living coming out?
So it's I just had a meeting about it yesterday. It's getting pushed from April 7th to April 28th, but it's a page, Amazon page that can take pre-orders, and you can
Okay,
website Flex Careers Consulting. That's all one word. .com, and you can actually go to the book page and you can pre-order my book.
and if somebody wanted to reach out to you regarding life coaching, how would they reach you?
Uh, Primarily through that web page I mentioned on my website. Flex Careers Consulting is probably the best way to get.
Okay,
Mhm.
flexcareersconsulting.com, right?
Yes.
Well, we'll be sure to add that in to the notes when we publish this podcast for you. Stagnation, you mentioned stagnation versus contentment.
Hmm.
You want to expand on that a little bit before we go? I think that's an important distinction, and I'm not sure how one approaches that. When is somebody stagnating, and when is somebody just sitting content? I mean, I think of the Buddha, under the banyan tree. Is he content or is he stagnating under there, being in one place at one time?
Four stages of living that I came up with is surviving, stabilizing, emerging, and thriving. And the reason I created this framework is because I don't think it's possible to go from survival mode to thriving. And yet I still hear people say you're either surviving or thriving, as if those are the only two states, right? So I think that's too much of a leap. When you're in fight, flight, or freeze in survival mode, you're dealing with a crisis. How do you then get to how do you get to not just, to thriving state? I do think that some people are stuck. I think, and that's why they come to me, and that's what I kind of explore in the book is that when people come to me, they're not content. But certain people have approached me after the first book who said, I don't really want to push myself. I don't really want to, like, what you're sort of inspiring your readers to do is to, get out of your comfort zone. I love this quote where it's like life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And I feel like, pushing yourself, even if you're not pushing yourself to a thriving state, at least you should have goals. So I talk about, like, what is full potential. And I still think that you should be, even if you're even in, and I do have a chapter on empty nesting and developing a living, like a legacy for yourself. I still think you can be content without pushing yourself to the thriving state. But stagnation is when you're literally stuck. You are stuck in your comfort zone. You don't take risks. You don't, you sort of get stuck in stabilization just because it feels safe, but you're not happy about it, right? You're feeling like more. This isn't about other people's expectations either. This is really about your own journey. But I do think, like, people who come to me, whether it's from a career perspective or other, like, life aspects, that they really are trying to, they just don't feel like life has as much meaning. So my work is really around, what is your life purpose? And the one thing we haven't talked about is the last part of my book is about, well, how do you help others on their journey, and how do you give back to to either the community or society? Because I think that that's really where you can, be self-actualized and actually find real meaning in life. So some people just kind of get stuck in routines. They just don't think that there can be more, and that's what the book is about. Is for those people that really want to explore what could be more in their life. That makes them feel like there's meaning and that kind of thing.
What I'm hearing from you, and I may be wrong, but what I'm hearing from you is the importance of service to others at some point in life.
Yes.
That there becomes some, and I'm probably a little older than you. I'm older than most. uh, but that's what I've found, and I've noticed in my wife too that she happens to volunteer at a women's prison twice a week,
Well, good for her.
and on top of her regular 40-hour a week job that she has, and but I see the distinction between her work life and her volunteer life, and how satisfied she is with her volunteer life, helping others. I find it to be a lesson for me about service to others, that service is really a critical element. But it's hard to be, when I'm hearing from you, it's hard to do that when you're in the surviving mode.
Right. Right, and my encouragement to everyone is to you have to get out of survival mode. It's really destructive from a mental, emotional, and physical sense. I mean, it's and I've lived in it. I've lived in it. I've had many crises, both health crises and losses and grief, and I've been divorced, and I've had my youngest son, who's the inspiration around the book. And the reason I wrote it was because he was in a very, very dark place in middle school, and now he's thriving in college, but it was quite the 5-year journey. And so I understand it's not a judgment. It's just, it's really, really bad if you stay in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, for your nervous system, for your relationships. It's very hard to have healthy relationships. You're also susceptible to addiction when you're in that place. So everyone experiences it, but the goal is to at least get to a more stable place. And then from that place, then we can get you to, like, where can you thrive? How do you achieve your own personal full potential? So find that in the book because I don't think anyone really does. I've did the research around what full potential is. And just based on that experiences that I've had, I came up with a sort of a formula around it. And then I explore that in the book, but yeah, so
Well, you hit home with that one because I had one of my kids in middle school. I used to give him a ride to school, and we had to drive kind of over a hill, and the sun would be coming up, and I go, "Gee, isn't the sunrise beautiful?" And he'd turn to me, he says, "Dad, you're taking me to a prison. I can't enjoy anything right now." So that was his middle school experience. So I can kind of relate that that's that age where it's really tough for some kids. Is that, and I don't know what it is, but I don't know if it's hormones or the transition from one school to another or something. But
yeah.
uh,
Well,
there there's
at
something there.
bullying, so it just destroyed his self-esteem, and he was afraid to go to school, so we had to pull him out.
Yeah.
So we had to build him back. He had to go to a couple different boarding schools, but he ended up absolutely thriving in the second one. And now he's in college. He's a freshman at Indiana, which is a great year to be there. But
Yeah.
it's a great first year there. So he is like doing extremely well. But where we were, and I know middle school is tough for most people. I mean, I don't think anyone's middle school was the best. Uh, but it just certain situations, whether it's when you're young or even in midlife or older in life, we're always going to deal with crises. And so that's why, even the subtitle is still Your Guide to Surviving Life Storms and Thriving in the Aftermath, because it really is much better on the other side of it.
So I got one last question for you. It made me think about this. Is there a distinction between survival and transitioning? Is there a distinction between those two words based on your experience in coaching many people, that those two words, transitioning and survival? In other words, when we
Hmm.
transition from something, no matter what our age is, okay, you
Hmm.
talked about young people transitioning into the workplace. You've talked about folks who, empty nesters who are transitioning into the workplace. Is, is there a form of survival connected with that? That, gee, I'm starting over or I'm starting something new. I'm leaving something behind and I'm moving to something new. Is there?
Yeah, I love this question. I've never received it. I love what you're asking. Uh, I think here's the thing that I try to state in the book is that transitions uh, come with grief, right? And so that's why some people really struggle with them is because you are closing a chapter in your life. Like you said, whether you're a young person, you're getting into the workplace, starting, if even if you when you're getting married, like you
Yeah.
are leaving being single, and if when you are done with parenting, as I just became an empty nester myself this year, then you are grieving being with your children,
Right.
and that part of your life. So I think some people get stuck in it and you might sort of fall back into more of a survival mode. But if you deal with the grief and then really look ahead as you start the next chapter, it can be, I call it transitions can become transformations.
Yes.
Uh, and so I think a lot of people they don't know that there's grief when like life comes with grief. It's not just loss if someone dies. I mean, there's just even if you and this has been happening a lot with my clients and friends of mine, they're losing their jobs that they've been for decades. That's a grief process. It also can be a really great time for you to say, what is it? I just was on TV about a few months ago on Fox 5, where I talk about the fact that you can have a second act that's better than the first. Right? There is you do have to change your mindset, but it definitely is possible and probable if you kind of follow through the steps that I talk about in the book where it's more of a transformation. But you have to grieve the chapter behind you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's some good words right there. That's some good advice. So I really appreciate it. And Christine, thank you for your time today. And let's say your name again, Christine Fruehwirth. And I'm going to spell it for everybody. Fruewirth.
Well, there's
Christine.
H in there. Fruehwirth.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for coming on. And I think that's some very useful advice you shared with our listeners today. And maybe we'll have you on again.
It'd be great. I would love it.
All right. Well, listen, take care and have a wonderful day, Christine.
Thanks. You too.
You have been listening to Minutes with Mango, Life in Motion. Subscribe to hear a new and unique guest each week as they comment on their life's journey and share experiences with lifestyle, culture, and career. You can always find us at minuteswithmango.com.